Colorado.
Sorry, mama, but I had to do it. Equality is still missing like an absence to it.
Yeah.
The black movement, we're tired of getting these to our necks. Fed up with the walls and tired of putting our backs to it. So I'ma be the voice for my kids. Since they can't do it, I'ma make the choice for my kids and tell them this is deeper than rap. I ain't no preacher, just a speaker with facts. We black gold, we just
black gold.
Unarmed, I should leave unharmed.
Unarmed, I should leave unharmed.
How many lives go on? How much longer we survive in this storm? Tired of marching and protesting and writing these songs. But the whole mood is different now. Standing up and sitting down. Talk about them issues. Is you getting in or getting out? Yeah, see, we just tired of being patient. We just need love and ventilation.
I tried to be silent.
I can't breathe.
Hard to be non-violent. I swear to God, I tried it. I tried to speak and I fight it. Cause I can't breathe.
Oh, man.
No, I can't breathe. I said I can't breathe. No, I can't breathe.
Penfield, that's Colorado's finest. That's A. Measy, Will Geist, Chai Rico, Ramond, and produced by Mike Coates. I Can't Breathe.
Oh, wow. That's on point.
Again. They said I can't breathe again.
Again, yeah. You know, we've been dealing with that time after time after time.
You know, Penn, how's the, like, let me ditch my mask for a second. You could ditch your mask. We're safe. We're social distance. But is COVID still a big deal?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. You know, you've got a national administration that has ignored the situation for months.
Okay.
And when they finally realized they couldn't ignore it because it wasn't going to go away magically like we were told, they're trying to get ahead of the curve. You know, what is disturbing is how, after all these months, how little we actually know about the disease and the virus. The fact that people of color are disproportionately impacted by the disease in terms of illnesses, hospitalizations, and deaths is concerning.
Right.
And the fact that we still have no vaccine. And, you know, Jeff, what really bothers me, Brother Jeff, is we know that there are some simple things you can do to at least diminish the spread.
What I understand is you wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
That's what we started doing when
that
we was a kid in kindergarten,
you know,
preschool. They was like, you know, use the potty, wash your hands.
Wash your hands, take a nap. But you know, wash your hands, wear a mask, social distance, and you know, don't do foolish stuff. But what's really disturbing is so many Americans are so selfish. They won't do those three simple things.
Simple things. But you know, if there was a vaccine, folks are saying they're not taking the vaccine. They're not ponying up to just get that shot.
Well, yeah, I'll be honest with you, Brother Jeff.
The doctors who are not going to pony up and get that shot.
I'll be honest with you. You know, Trump has been so aggressive in pushing a vaccine, and quite frankly, he and his administration have shown, from my perspective, that they'll lie, misspeak, and mislead, that I wouldn't trust any vaccine they came up with right away.
I mean, the statistics. Is that how you say it? Statistics.
The numbers.
The statistics and the numbers. They bear it out. The studies, they're like, folks are not ponying up. But I saw like 70,000 black folks and white folks and other folks and brown and in Washington D.C. with the, get your knee off our neck rally. So, you know, black folks have to decide whether they're going to deal with COVID, the cops, and in some cases ourselves.
Yeah, well, you know, we have shown historically over time we can multitask. So we'll deal with all of them at the same time.
That's what we're doing.
We'll deal with COVID. We'll deal with systemic racism. We'll deal with over-policing. And we'll deal with all of these things at the same time. We have to. That has been our life's experience my entire life.
Well, I could tell you all this in the Free Think Zone with what you've heard already. We should have hit you with that trigger alert if you're not already triggered. This is a show that triggers people because you've entered a Free Think Zone. If you're not willing to be exposed to other points of view, tune out now, like right now. That's what they say in the South, right now. Right now, and don't read the comments. You have been warned. We have Penfield Tate in the Free Think Zone. You know Penfield. His father was the first black mayor in Boulder. He's been a part of the law community going all the way back. Big member of the Sam Carey Bar Association. You know, all of that, and you've run for the mayoral position a couple of times. Yeah. And what are you up to these days?
You know, right now, Brother Jeff, I have my own law firm, Tate Law, and I'm helping people with what I call wealth management and estate planning, wills, estates, trust, but I'm still also doing a good amount of public finance. So I help state and local governments borrow money to build infrastructure, airports, roads, bridges, parks, those sorts of things.
You know, when you were running on the campaign trail, there were a lot of great ideas, and I want to know if any of those ideas have been implemented, or are we in a condition where you know, some things are being ignored. You're talking about wealth management, and it's not unfair when I call our city the Mile High Income City.
No, not at all. I mean, you know, Brother Jeff, you have used that term for a while, and people dismissed it, but, you know, you've turned out to be a prophet.
Man.
Because, you know, when you look at the information now, Denver is the second fastest gentrifying city in the country, behind only San Francisco.
Well, if they say second, I always say it's first. But if it's second, it's like a photo finish.
Yeah, well, it really is. It really is, because you know we're churning through people now, and neighborhoods are being flipped over and taken over in a heartbeat. And it's driving people who have been here for years out of the city, but more distressingly, it's having a disproportionate impact on people of color.
Well, you know, on the campaign trail, there was a lot of discontent around developers and who has access to the city, who the city's being built for, at the expense of others. And, you know, regular homeowners are feeling the squeeze with their tax burden, you know, all of this density, all of this stuff that's taking place. This growth is moved well beyond black and brown. It's ordinary people feel the pinch. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah. No, if you're a working class person in Denver, you've been hammered. You asked a minute ago about ideas brought up during the campaign and what have we seen. So during the campaign, you know, with all of the community and neighborhood forums and debates we did, the two items that were brought up most consistently was the lack of affordable or attainable housing and the problem with homelessness. And many of your viewers will remember we also had a ballot measure at that time that was seeking to basically nullify the city's camping ban.
Prop 100 or something like that.
Yeah, and all these
was it
people,
3? What was the number? Prop 300. We could do better.
We can do better. And all these business people raised a whole bunch of money saying we can do better, and they defeated the measure, but they've done nothing. So one of the ideas that I raised, and several of candidates raised other ideas, I was the one who raised the idea of safe outdoor camping sites.
That's right.
And remember, during the campaign, I said we ought to find some sites. And I even went further than that. I said we ought to cut a deal as mayor. I would approach Denver Public Schools and cut a deal with them because they do have some vacant buildings. Most of their land is contained by fencing already. The buildings have bathrooms and showers and kitchens and other things. And it seemed to me an ideal way to begin to try to bring homeless populations, unhoused populations together, where you can not only keep them safe and give them a place to stay, but begin to infuse services into the process.
But Penn, that's assuming you want to address that issue and you don't want to push it away.
Well,
like if you want it, this city, like when you think about gentrification, the root of that model, if you will, is to get rid of the undesirable elements so that you can attract capital. And there's nothing more undesirable to capital than to having unhoused neighbors next to properties that have for sale signs on them. Like around the corner, there's a small townhouse that says they're starting from $450 to $750K right in the hood. And so if you're going to have unhoused neighbors, etc., no capital wants to be around that. And so the city has spent all of this time getting rid of the housing developments, getting rid of, you know, the more undesirable elements, or even getting rid of low income or working class communities so that the capital could come in. So all of the great ideas are not going to be implemented because they're not trying to solve that problem. They want to push it to Aurora. They want to push it to other cities, and they want to be the big, shiny, like, city on the hill.
You know, I think that's absolutely right, Brother Jeff. I mean, one of the things that I talked about during the campaign and continue to fight for is the problem we have, one of the many problems we have in this city, as a root cause is we didn't put people first. We've put money and property and giving it a higher priority over people. And here's what I mean by that. You know, you got some folks in business and in administration saying we need investment, we need growth, we need to bring in jobs, but they're looking at money and assuming that addressing the human condition will naturally follow from that, even though they put no infrastructure in place to do that. But if you focus on people first and the needs of people in your community, there is a way to improve cities, to improve neighborhoods, to make investment in cities where you're supporting the people who live in those neighborhoods and making their condition better rather than spending money and displacing them and forcing them out of the neighborhoods they've grown up in or lived in for generations.
That's a different philosophy, though. Like,
it is. It's a total. It's a paradigm shift. You got to think about it differently.
I like that. I mean, I like that approach. Like for example, people think that if you don't like gentrification, somehow you're against progress. And I'm saying, no, if you want to build communities, if you want to build a city, why not build it with those who are a part of that city in mind? I'm not talking about just the high-end community. I'm talking about everyone. So if you've got an unhoused neighbor situation, why not deal with that by creating housing? Oh. Like a program. Like, who wants a program? Like, why do you think people who are unhoused, who many are dealing when you get to the street level, you know, they're dealing with mental illness, they're dealing with substance abuse, but that's not even talking about the families that are sleeping on couches. Like COVID has sent a lot of people back to their parents' home or their parents with their children, or, you know, making a decision between prescriptions and paying for housing. What makes people think that someone just wants a program? Like, why not create housing? And they say that there's so much housing right now that's unoccupied. Why not figure out how to build a community by working with those at every level to participate in the city?
It's a question of what your focus and emphasis is. You know, one of the things we talked about, again, going back to the campaign, Kalen was one of the people who said, we got all these high-rise buildings, all these developments with all these empty units. We can solve the unhoused problem immediately if the city of Denver decided to invest in putting the unhoused in some of these vacant units
That's
now.
not their philosophy, though. The philosophy
that's right.
of gentrification is attract capital by getting rid of anything that would make capital nervous. Right. And so I don't know we're heading in the right. Are we doing better? Like millions were spent. And remember, the ones that ran the initiative, those were, you know, the unhoused neighbor advocates. That was a citizen initiative, and the money came against them, and they said, no, we understand we have a problem, but we can do better. Are we doing better?
No, and that's part of the problem, Brother Jeff. The people who fought the initiative never intended to do better. Let's be honest. They just did not want the camping ban repealed. Now, I get that. I get the fact that there are people who don't want to wake up, walk out the front door, and see somebody sleeping on the lawn or the parking strip.
Right.
I get that. But that's not what this whole camping ban issue was about. It was about forcing the conversation to force the city to build initiatives. Are we doing better? No. And it's a very simple reason why. From the time of the election, after that, COVID hit. You saw not a single major initiative to deal with the unhoused before the pandemic hit. Then we got the double whammy of the pandemic, and not only are there more unhoused people on the street, but now you have a pandemic where it's now become a health and safety issue, not just for them, but for the rest of the community. So the investment you need to make to address the problem now is significantly greater because you didn't stand up. I was going to use some different words.
I know.
You didn't stand up and address the situation immediately in May or June or 2019 when all of those neighborhood forums and all of those debates were telling you that attainable, affordable housing and homelessness were the two biggest issues facing the city.
Well, COVID is the great equalizer. COVID gets you beyond those fancy marketing slogans.
Sure.
Like right now, if you said you were going to do better, COVID's making you do better.
Right.
And
right.
if you don't, it's at your own peril. Like, for example, Penfield, I'm looking at, and let's talk about law enforcement as it relates to the building and the development of a city and gentrification. We are spending tons of money on law enforcement to sweep unhoused neighbors,
Right.
and not arrest, sweep them. And in the midst of COVID-19, they sweep it from 29th to 26th, and they sweep it back to 26th, and they sweep it back and forth. What's happening with this virus moving back and forth with policies that say sweep them and move them along, and their response is move them along to where?
Well, you know what it's doing. It's simply moving the virus to other parts of the city because you aren't infusing the health care and the social services and the substance abuse and the mental health treatment that may be needed for certain portions of the unhoused population. You're just basically moving them along like you would tow a car and move it from one street to another.
That's what they're doing.
You're just pushing people around, and you're not addressing the problem. You are not going to incentivize someone who is unhoused to become housed just because you sweep the street where they're currently staying.
Penfield,
that's not the motivation.
I sat there and watched right outside the cultural center, right outside the free think zone, upwards to 60, 70 police officers who spent over 10 to 11 hours standing in front of 4 empty tents in ranks. And in my opinion, it was a political show of force, and it was a message being sent to Councilwoman Candy C. DeBaca because the night before she had voted and brought forth a proposal to have a peace force as opposed to a police force, and she's been talking about defunding and reallocating those dollars. And when you start talking about dollars, the next day an entire police force is outside of her office in front of 4 tents. Those tents were empty in 15 minutes, and they set up this dynamic to where violence, may have ensued in the 11th hour. So if you can imagine, all these officers are out here. They're not guarding anything. They don't want to be there. Like,
right.
I know the District 2 officers. The commander was like, this ain't my heart.
No.
I'll pay to move some individuals. And then the city gave her the call and said, no, we'll pay. The police force is being used politically to send messages, and most of the black officers and many officers I know, they're just waiting to retire. They don't even want to do it anymore. They don't even want to play this political game, and it's like a waste of law enforcement.
Brother Jeff, that's exactly correct. And first of all, we all need to give props to Councilwoman C. DeBaca for having the courage to raise this issue, to force the conversation, because on a fundamental level, she is correct in this respect. Police forces, historically, going back centuries, were peacekeeping forces.
Right.
They were to keep the peace. They were a response to a situation. What we have now is, over the passage of time, our police departments are not in the truest sense, historical sense, peacekeeping forces. They're more proactive. They actually initiate contact. They initiate activity. They approach people. They go to homeless encampments and start action rather than responding necessarily to a situation. Being there, just being there, I would argue, is not a situation that requires a response. If you're shooting up the place, breaking up stuff, doing a bunch of things,
then do some law enforcement.
Do some law enforcement. That, or keep the peace by dealing with that.
I mean, even when the sheriffs show up to do evictions, they don't do they go and they put that paper there. They get that stuff moved out. They get the locks changed, and they're out of there.
They don't have the ability to drag someone out the building and throw them on the street. Under some circumstances in Colorado, you can take people's stuff out the apartment and put it on the street, but you can't drag people out of the house.
Penfield? Who is all this in support of? Like, why? Like when you think about the rising, escalating cost of this particular city, who is this city being built on behalf of?
Brother Jeff, it's hard to say specifically, but clearly These efforts are designed to address the interest of, I would say, folks in higher socioeconomic status who are property owners who don't want things in front of them that are visually unappealing and unattractive and want to feel safe and secure. Now let's be honest and let's be fair. Those of us who live in cities want to be safe, we want to be secure, and we'd like to have a visually appealing city. There's nothing wrong with that. But it is one thing to say, let's have proactive policies to address the problems and issues we see, like the unhoused, versus let's have policies and procedures that punish people or target people just because they happen to be unhoused.
Like every city, every nation, every form of gathering, you're going to have those that are doing well, those are doing in the middle, and those that could use a hand up.
Right.
I think that you judge a great city by how you deal with those who need a hand up. It's easy to help those who have everything. That's
Right.
called pandering.
Right. Or tax cuts.
Yeah. It's easy to say, what do you want for you to like me? And you know, you have everything, and that's why I want to talk to you. But it's more difficult to say, you know what? Yes, I want to be in a community. Yes, I want to buy property there. And no, I don't want that element around me. And no, I don't want to do anything about it but call the police.
Right. Right.
And with that being said, another big issue on the campaign trail was these developers. Mm-hmm. Like everywhere you go, there's some more concrete going up. When you think about the development, I want to talk about this open space dynamic.
Sure.
Because now, if you just go over to the Park Hill Golf Course, you know, that's the next large tract of land, you know, that is slated to be developed. Penn, I want to get your opinion on that. And I also want to ask you, what does this easement conversation mean for those of us who are lay people?
Sure. And Brother Jeff, I'm going to start by saying this, because I think, in fairness, your listeners ought to know this and ought to understand my perspective and where I'm coming from. But I also want to change how we dialogue about some of these things in our community. Anybody who comes on your show or other shows and wants to talk about this ought to disclose their interest in the situation.
All right.
So I am a member of SOS Denver, Save Open Space Denver. I am an unpaid volunteer. I am a lawyer by training, but folks don't pay me to be a lawyer on behalf of this effort. So I am a volunteer. I live in the Park Hill neighborhood. We are fighting to preserve the open space condition, specifically of the Park Hill Golf Course. And the way we went about doing that, Brother Jeff, is we started by preparing what was going to be an initiated measure to go to the voters to put some protections in place that would have restricted the ability to develop parkland or land covered by a city-owned conservation easement without a vote of the people. Due to the pandemic, our group did not feel comfortable standing in parking lots and grocery stores or going door to door asking people to sign a petition. So we approached the city council, and Councilwoman Sita Baca agreed to carry a proposed charter amendment for us to deal with this. We appeared before one council committee. Based on some of the objections we heard, we dropped the parkland piece out of it. So it just dealt with city-owned land covered by a city-owned conservation easement. What is that, you say? There's only one in the city and county of Denver, and it's Park Hill Golf Course.
We're ground zero.
We're ground zero. And what it is in 1989, Denver voters approved a general obligation bond issue to build a bunch of projects and improve a number of facilities around the city. But one of the things included in that bond election was $2 million set aside at the time for the city to buy the Park Hill Golf Course. What happened is, with the passage of time, no deal was struck, and frankly, $2 million was not enough to buy the land anymore. So under the leadership of Mayor Webb, he took that $2 million of voter-approved funding and bought a conservation easement and placed it on the land. So what does that mean? A couple things. A conservation easement is something that is created not by city ordinance, but by state law. So the laws of the state of Colorado control this issue. And what a conservation easement says is, when you buy land and put an easement on it, you're basically buying all of the development rights on that land in perpetuity. Forever.
That's what we have?
That's what we have. Forever. So the Clayton College, which owned the land at the time, sold the development rights to the people of the city and county of Denver forever. For $2 million.
I haven't heard this
And
Ben, hold on. I haven't heard it put this way.
Forever for $2 million because they needed the money. And the city was willing to help the Clayton College because they run some great programs for kids there. And they needed the money. So we, the people of the city and county of Denver, owned the development rights to that entire 155-acre site. Under state law, the purpose of a conservation easement is to preserve the natural environment and the open space and protect it from development.
I.e. developers.
Developers.
And then you have a city that has, and you have city leadership that has an extreme love affair with developers.
Hello.
And then you have a mayor like the Honorable Wellington E. Webb who says, well, let me buy this golf course, but I don't have enough money. Let me put something on it, i.e. $2 million. And this is to ward off development. And then you have a new administration that loves developers, and now they're butting heads because this is antithetical to what they want to do.
Right. And the key thing to note here is when Mayor Webb paid $2 million for the people of the city and county of Denver to own the development rights in perpetuity, nobody forced the then landowner Clayton to do this. They wanted to sell the development rights.
And they needed the money.
And they needed the money. And, you know, around the state, Jeff, now, Brother Jeff, we only have this one conservation easement that the city owns in Denver. There are other conservation easements that the city has granted for open space, but the city doesn't own the easement, the development rights. This is the only one, but there are conservation easements around the state where landowners have willingly sold the development rights to their land in perpetuity, forever. So the conservation easement that sits on the Park Hill Golf Course is not unique or strange in the state. It just happens to be the only one of its type in the city and county of Denver, but they're all over the state of Colorado.
But Penn, can I say this? And by the way, everyone go to brotherjeff.com, make a donation of any amount. We are powered by the people. You are the people. And, go to brotherjeff.com, make a donation of any amount. A clinic is going on right now because what we're doing with Penfield Tate is getting to the root of an argument right now. Like a lot of folks are saying a lot of different things, but what I've learned today is that I, Brother Jeff, citizen, taxpayer in the Mile High Income City, I own some easement in perpetuity. I have a say.
You paid the taxes. Your money went to that, which was why our proposal simply said that before you can do residential or commercial development on land covered by a city-owned conservation easement, with certain exceptions like the city buying it for a park, that it required a vote of the people. Now, our proposal did not say what it needed to look like, what development was permissible. Our proposal did not say how you need to develop it or how you needed to plan it. Our proposal simply said before you get the right to do anything, it has to be approved by a vote of the people.
You got to ask me. You got to ask Brother Jeff.
Our theory was the entire city paid tax dollars to pay for this thing. The entire city ought to have a voice. And that was part of the source of contention as the whole thing developed.
I want an investment. I want a return on investment for my $2 million.
Well, yeah.
And I want some use, some open space. I want to, like there are so many places now that are being developed that I have no access to.
Sure.
Because it's become private, and we've got a lot of city property that has been sold to the private, market, et cetera.
28th and Fairfax.
28th
you
and
actually
Fairfax.
You did a video on that. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, we should have a say in what happens because we purchased the development rights in the form of an easement that you've got to ask us.
No. So, as we talk about that, let me take a moment to talk about some of the arguments that have been made against our proposal and how we responded.
Okay.
To them. So some people said, look, The easement is elitist because the easement requires that the entire site be a golf course forever. And we have argued and maintained that's not what the easement says. Golf is a permissible use. So are ball fields, so are tennis courts, so are community gardens. There are a number of permissive uses on the site. Golf is one specifically mentioned, as were some of the others, but golf is not the only use. Now, here's the irony, Brother Jeff. It's the Hancock administration and the developer that are claiming that they're hamstrung because golf is the only permitted use and it somehow is elitist and discriminatory towards people of color.
So that's not true.
No, but here's the other problem. So without a vote of the people, without conferring with you or me or anybody else, the city signed a contract and cut a deal with Westside, the developer, that says for 3 years, they don't even have to run it as a golf course, which is why it's sitting there doing nothing right now. So the irony is the thing we want, which is open space accessible to the public, is almost what we have because the city cut them a 3-year deal. Basically, the agreement the city has with Westside says, we know you want to develop. So to help you out, you don't have to spend money for 3 years running a golf course. Just let it sit there. And we'll give you 3 years to talk to people and try to convince them to let you develop the site. And if you can convince them to let you develop the site, we'll deal with it then. But even though we all agree and believe it has to be a golf course, we're going to tell you it doesn't have to be a golf course. Now people
hold on, but in 3 years, their leadership is gone.
I'm sure it was just coincidental about the time frame. I'm sure that was just a coincidence. But here's the thing to consider, which is ironic. So that was part of the issue. It can only be a golf course, which is categorically not true. And even when we were last in front of council committee, one of the city attorneys said, well, yeah, there are other uses that are permitted, but we think golf course is the primary use. And if it's not a golf course, it's a violation of the easement. Now, I didn't get a chance to speak, or I would have asked him, so why did the city sign a contract with Westside, the developer, saying, psych, for 3 years, you don't even have to make it a golf course. Just let it sit there. If you believe what you're saying and the documents required to be an operating golf course without conferring with any neighborhood, without talking with the community, without talking with anyone, why did you sign an agreement saying, forget it, it doesn't have to be a golf course?
Penn, I got to ask you one more question. I've got plenty of questions, but I got to ask you this one. I'm a property owner, and I get that little tag that says you could pay all of your taxes at once, or you could pay a portion at the front of the year and a portion at the back, and then we're going to list you in the newspaper and sell your taxes to somebody that can have your property if you, for over 3 years, don't pay them. Has Westside got to pay taxes on that land?
They do have to pay taxes on the land.
That's a lot of land.
Yeah. Well, now here's what I don't know, Brother Jeff.
I want to know the relationship between how much I'm paying in this mile-high income city and how much Westside is paying. How much? Because everybody says that's a lot of land.
Yeah.
I want to see that tax burden.
Well, I would recommend that people go online to www.denvergov.org and go to the property records, look it up, and see what the tax bill is. But I guarantee you this, that Westside is getting another. First of all, they bought the land at a discount.
I heard it was something like $25 million or something.
$24, and the city gave them back $6 because the city took part of the land for the Platte to Park Hill golf course. So their net $18 million. And Councilwoman Cita Baca is a pro at this. She has calculated and figured out it's probably worth 6 or 7 times that much money with the development rights. And that's the key. Their taxes, I suspect, aren't reflective of the value of the land with the development rights, so they're continuing to get a break. They're paying taxes on land absent the development rights.
Is this politics? Like, I don't know what politics is, but this seems real if politics were to work a certain way, I would think politics works this way.
Is water wet?
It's water wet.
So here's another thing that I think is important, and I really think it's important for our community. And it's the question of who has a voice, who gets engaged, and how does that happen?
Yes.
Now, Westside has been having a number of conversations with people around the community, which I encourage, and I think they ought to do.
I've been asking them to come in here.
Yeah.
And I was saying not someone who speaking like not like a mouthpiece, not like I'm like, no, the one who was at the signing.
Get Kenneth Ho to show up.
What's his name?
Kenneth Ho.
Kenneth Ho. I know you've got to be watching this show because this show is about you. Kenneth Ho, why haven't you been in the Free Think Zone? Kenneth Ho, come holler at your brother. And while you're at it, Kenneth, you got such a great deal. I would love to go to brotherjeff.com and see that Kenneth Ho has made a donation of any amount. We've given you like $8 million worth of cake money. Kenneth Ho, get over here. But go ahead.
Let's talk about the community piece, because one of the concerns that was raised, and this is why I started out by, when we talked about this topic, saying that people need to come clean and disclose their interest. I'm a volunteer doing this, but Westside has been working the neighborhood and making soft commitments to folks about their ability to be involved in the future development, getting a piece of the action, getting a deal, being hired. Let me begin by saying, number one, fundamentally, I don't have a problem with that. If we can get, black-owned businesses to benefit economically from what is happening around the city, I'd like to see it. My point is, be upfront with the community, disclose your interest, and tell people you're paid or about to be paid or expecting to be paid as part of your participation and support for a project. So Westside has been working the Northeast Denver area, and this is what's disturbed me. I feel that the developer and some of their supporters have made open space in Northeast Denver a racial issue. What they've been saying is that they haven't quite gone as far as to say that only black people ought to be able to vote on whether the easement is lifted, but that's essentially what they're trying to say. What I've heard them sort of insinuate is that if you don't live north of Martin Luther King and east of Colorado Boulevard, you shouldn't have a say on what happens with the Park Hill Golf Course.
Didn't the city pay to have that easement?
The city bought the easement.
Not the folks east or west of a particular part of town.
Which is part of my point. And I got to tell you, Brother Jeff, it's caused some division within the black community.
Really?
Yeah,
I haven't heard.
It has. And look,
but you see this every day, and you're like in the, know about it. Black folks is like ruffled up about Kenneth Ho's money.
Some of them are. I think some of them have a financial interest. Now, to be fair, some do not. Some feel that they think that only north of MLK and east of Colorado Boulevard ought to dictate what happens to the land, and I think they argue that there's a high enough concentration of black people that if that's who you limit the decision making to, black people will have a measure of self-determination with regard to land. I don't know how, because we don't own it.
Folks are going to all of a sudden in the mile high income city have this whatever big interest in the next big development.
That's part of the argument I hear. And here's what's gotten me disturbed is when Councilwoman Sita Baca took this to the floor of the city council, Brother Jeff, I have to tell you, and it's not just my opinion, there were several of us who were on the call, who were attending the meeting virtually, who didn't get a chance to speak. And I'll just be blunt. I heard some of the most racist stuff come out of the city council, and it bothered me.
Really? What?
Well, I heard, and in particular, I was concerned about the comments by Councilman Flynn, Councilwoman Kanish, and Councilman Herndon, who essentially said in a number of different ways that some black people count more than other black people, and only black people north of MLK count, and black people who may have had elected office before, their opinions aren't valid because they're not in elected office now. And that, I talked to 12 black people who live north of Martin Luther King, and they all told me they want this. And I didn't get a chance to say, I know there are more than 12 black people who live north of Martin Luther King. If you're going to make a statement like that, you better have a more representative sample than just the people the developer are putting in front of you to say, gee whiz, we want development to happen.
Ben, let's take some questions.
Sure.
Let's take some questions. I want to go, and there are some folks that I think, and some I know that are attached to the Park Hill argument, I imagine on Kenneth Hull's side. I haven't really heard it, but I know that, I have a lot of respect for Wayne Vaden. I know that he's been involved. I have a lot of respect for Jason McBride. I think he's involved, and of course Norman Harris the third. Three great men that I really respect and would love to hear more. But I really want to hear from Kenneth Hull. Yeah. Because one of the things that I've seen is that, there were unhoused neighbors on that open space.
Right.
And of course it's private, but if you are so down with the community, why push folks who are, on the property that's not being used? Why push them away? Particularly, they were saying these ones were keeping it clean and up.
I get West Side's point about not necessarily wanting to accommodate unhoused people, but like I said, consider what we have. We have an easement that the city owns on behalf of the people that prohibits development. We have an easement that West Side claims requires them to run a golf course, but they cut a side deal with the city that says for 3 years they don't have to do anything.
Well, for 3 years they can make it an unhoused neighbor camp. Whatever.
Or do something.
Do something. Okay, Chelsea Harris, why should people who live in Cherry Creek or the Highlands have a say on what happens in Park Hill?
So, hello, Chelsea. Chelsea is, if it's the Chelsea I think of, it's Norman's sister.
Yes.
And their mother and I went to see a shoe together. So
great family.
Great, wonderful family. Chelsea, I would tell you this, because that's how we do things in Denver. When city council votes every Monday on something that happens in the city, they don't limit the voting to just those council people who represent the area where development is happening. All 13 of them get to vote. When we've looked at, the current charter amendment that says you can't develop the designated park unless it's a vote of the people, all of the people in the city, because the park is a public and community asset. This conservation easement is no different. It was purchased as an asset for and on behalf of all of the people of the city and county of Denver. No matter where you live in the city, if you pay taxes, you contributed theoretically to buying this easement. So why shouldn't you have a voice in what happens?
Now, Shanta Harrison, she's asking Norman, and remember, free thinkers out there, I can't see all of the questions. I see like the bottom three or the top, I see some. So if you've got a direct question, if you put it in now, I can go right to it. But it looks like Shanta is having a conversation with Norman, and she's asking the same question that she's asked Jason. And so I want to put this to you, Penn, in terms of outreach. She says, how do you all plan to engage the residents of Park Hill? I live in Northeast Park Hill, and I haven't heard any plans from your group for my voice to be heard. We know that folks don't show up to most community engagement events. Clayton already tried that. So what do you all plan to do? Talk about the outreach in terms of what you've seen the other side doing to reach the community.
Sure. And Shanta raises a good point that we ought to talk about. Clayton, before it sold the land to West Side, did put together a group of neighbors to talk about the future of the Park Hill Golf Course. Here's the problem, though. They put together this committee. They put together this group. I have some issues with how it was run. I went to several of the meetings, and frankly, I stormed out because I thought it was a sham. But what happened is they prepared a final report, but didn't show it to any of their own people on the committee. They just prepared the report. Clayton prepared it with their consultant, CRL Maria Garcia Berry, and then they posted it on the website. So the committee they established didn't even get to see the report that was posted in their own name, which is why a dozen of the people on the committee prepared another document that said, number one, we never signed off on this, and number two, let us tell you the problems with everything you're talking about in terms of how you've ignored community and what you haven't done right.
Well, well, I could tell you this. One of the reasons that Albus Brooks was sent packing and sent home, because he was running those sham initiatives as well, particularly with the City Park Golf Course, when they planned to make that ditch, and they were saying it was on behalf of the people, but it was really on behalf of getting money for the federal government for the highway, etc.
Oh, I-70 East.
Yes, and they were saying that they were doing community outreach and all those different things, and they really weren't. Okay. And they were coming up like they would have final plans and all that stuff. They wouldn't tell. It was like a real secret group, and they get what they want. So when people are saying they haven't been outreached to by other organizations, that's been a long tradition that has happened for those who have to get what they want by saying that they're playing by the rules, which they really are not.
Yeah. No, and to Shanta's other point, I can't speak to what West Side or any other potential developer is going to do. They have to figure it out. One thing that I'll stress is the group I'm with, SOS Denver, we never proposed and are not going to propose a specific outcome for the site, except we want the conservation easement and its purposes that are already in place maintained. That's all we're saying.
Tony Pickford says members of the Smart Growth Initiative group, and I don't know who that is, so you could tell me that, Smart Growth Initiative group have admitted privately that they want a cut of the deal, but publicly are saying they are just an organization that promotes asset-based community development. Does that ring true, or do you know anything about that?
You know, Brother Jeff, it's one of those deals. It's kind of like you talked about sham process. In the course of this, I and other members of SOS Denver have had conversations with people who support West Side and their plans for development. And when you probe a little bit and talk to some of them, not everybody, some of them, they will tell you that their hope and desire is that somehow they're involved in the redevelopment of the site so that they or their companies will personally profit or benefit. And I told you at the beginning, Brother Jeff, I don't have a problem with black-owned businesses benefiting in some of the economic development activities in this community. And you and I both talked about that as there's economic development, it ought to benefit the people in the community, not serve to displace them. My only point is when people show up here or anyplace else and talk about it, if they have a current or potential financial interest or one they're trying to negotiate, they ought to tell people
out front
and let them know up front, I'm looking to make money on this. This is how I'm hoping to participate. This is my opinion on the process.
That's called transparency.
Transparency.
And that's what we want in city government.
That's exactly right.
But that's what we are not really getting, but that's what folks want. Eric Clark says anything but keeping the space green is a non-starter for him.
No, and some people feel that strongly. I mean, Eric, my preference would be to have open space, but open space in my mind means a number of different things. If the community stepped forward and said, you know what, we think we need a more robust playground for kids, we think we need a massive community garden so we can grow some of our own food, if we want a ball field or we want something else, that works for me.
What is open space, or is that kind of like when folks say we need affordable housing?
Well, ironically, open space is what we have now. The land is there, not quite in its natural state because it's been modified to be a golf course, but it's open and there's no development on the site. In my mind, if you were to go there and say, all right, let's take 3 or 4 acres and build a community garden, I think that's consistent with the conservation easement purposes.
Speaking of Wayne Vaden, as a matter of fact, Wayne has always been a constant supporter of this platform and everything that we do. As a matter of fact, he drops off of those N90 masks that we have and give to the community. That's via Wayne. He says we need smart development, not an open field grocery store, athletic field, etc. Let's move forward, not stay stagnant. We need a vision. No vision is nothing.
Wayne, I agree partly and disagree partly. I think we need open space because historically in our communities we haven't had access to a lot of it. I think it is right to have a community conversation, not just with select people, but a broad conversation about what ought to happen or what's conceivable on the site. My only point has been that before we agree to lift the easement, we ought to know exactly what's going to happen on that site. We know exactly who ought to benefit. We know exactly how people are going to be held accountable and responsible for whatever gets done on the site, but not lift the easement and then hope and pray and cross our fingers that good things happen, because we've seen what has happened in the past. Stapleton was supposed to have a certain percentage of affordable and attainable housing, and it didn't happen.
I seen them open up banks with black folks that played the saxophone.
All right.
It'd be hard to, then all of a sudden it changes. And them black folks wasn't, them same banks was redlining and foreclosing and I mean, it's been an interesting thing. Tyrone Hubbard says, in all fairness, the $2 million the city used was from allocated bond funds, but there was no vote by the people in 1997. The easement deal was made between Clayton City Council and the mayor of the time.
Tyrone is exactly correct with a couple of modifications. It was bond proceeds that were voted on by the city to be available to acquire. And as I said before, Brother Jeff, the original plan was to buy the whole thing. But with the passage of time, the $2 million was only enough to buy the development rights in perpetuity. But, the bond proceeds get paid for by tax revenues, by the taxes we pay. And so that's how you repay them. So that's the piece where taxpayers acquired the easement. And yeah, you're right, Tyrone. It was Mayor Webb and his administration that reached out to Clayton College. Clayton College needed money.
And they work for us.
That's right. And
on behalf of the people.
That's the important thing. The easement was acquired on behalf of the people of the city and county of Denver. Now another private developer owns the land, and let's be real transparent here. Westside bought the land knowing there was a conservation easement on it, and they had no right to development. I've been in forums with Kenneth Ho where he has admitted that. I've been in forums with Kenneth Ho where he has admitted Westside took a gamble, because what they do is gamble that if they buy land with problems, they can work the politics and the business to remove the problems and the obstacles and get to development.
That's politics.
So that's right. They bought this knowing what the restrictions were, but they just figured they could work the politics, they could work the money, and change things.
They had their man in their corner. Because I've purchased property. Do you know how many triplicate things you have to sign at closing?
Yeah, no, they're
going to tell you every single thing.
Yeah.
You don't go into a closing in the blind. No. They're going to tell you everything. And I imagine buying something that big and that complicated, would have perhaps cost a whole acre of trees.
Yeah, and yeah, that's right. And like I said, Westside has freely admitted to everybody they knew when they bought the land, but they couldn't develop.
But politically, they probably made contributions. They did all of because politically, you try to get your man or your woman in your corner.
Yeah.
That being said, I know that they don't have to do anything with the property for 3 years, and it doesn't matter as long as you water the grass or whatever. There's whatever. But I have seen that facility being used by community an awful lot. Like Jason McBride, I know that he's going to do or is perhaps doing a school in there right now. I've been to several community meetings, so it looks like Kenneth Ho is using the facility, is not sitting vacant. I've seen it being used by community a lot.
No, and Brother Jeff, and I think that's fair. They ought to get credit for doing that. I know that I went to a birthday party for King Harris, one of the stalwarts in our community, who had a birthday party at the Park Hill Golf Course. And, King Harris, Norm Early, the late Bill Roberts, a host of folks often frequented the golf course, and it's got a tradition of that. Yeah, I'm a member of the Owl Club of Denver, and in 1941, our first debutante ball was held at the Park Hill Golf Course Country.
You guys still have the Owls Club over there on Madison?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jason McBride says he's not getting paid by Westside or any developer. He represents citizens of the community that are most affected by development or overdevelopment in Park Hill. And Jason McBride is, always, a stand-up guy as it relates to all of this. Penfield, Wayne Vaden, let's go back here. The easement is an excuse to remain stagnant. We all know that Park Hill golf course can be an economic engine for our community. We need to keep our dollars. Let's see. Oh, hold on. See more. We need to keep our dollars in our community. Real economic development, not a park.
Wayne, I disagree with you respectfully. I don't think that the easement is an excuse for stagnation. As I've said repeatedly, the proposal we put forward simply requires a vote of the people for any residential or commercial development. It's not an absolute ban. Our thinking was that some developer would come up with a proposal that worked for everybody, and we all vote on it and said, okay, if you're going to do exactly this and it's enforceable and we can hold you to it, and we can see it, and we know what it's going to be. If the community wants to do it, then you put it to a vote. I mean, that makes sense. And let's also be clear about the history of the city and county of Denver, particularly in these most recent times. Brother Jeff and I are sitting here on Welton Street. A lot of money's been invested in Welton Street. How many of the businesses that you've known over the decades, whether it's Mr. Selman, whether it's Big Al, whether it's Miss Minerva, how many of them are here now to benefit from the economic investment that's been put on Welton Street?
Now you're scratching. See, why'd you have to go there, Penn?
Well, no.
I mean,
no.
and it's fair because we've had political leadership that has had this amazing ability to look over their own community to help build other communities, particularly with people who are not even from the city. And maybe that's politics, and that is true. You make a valid point. Norman Harris replies to Shanta saying there are multiple ways to engage our community. We have tremendous participation because we are very entrenched in the Northeast Denver community. I will connect with you because we have an event coming up in a few weeks. So it sounds like Norman Harris is a contact person for outreach, and nobody does it better than Norman.
Yeah, and Norman, I would simply encourage you to let people know that it sounds like, and from what I've been told, part of your involvement is because you're looking to be part of the development team with Westside. More power to you. Just be transparent with people and tell them that's your objective.
Tony Pickford says, people, just be honest. If you want to ball out and get paid and are about black economic development, just say so.
Yeah. As Brother Jeff, I've said it
you
two
said
or three
it.
times.
Just be transparent.
Just be transparent. If your involvement is because you want to participate economically in the redevelopment of the site for the benefit of yourself, your business, your family, I don't have a problem with that. Just tell people that's where you're coming from.
Sandy Robnett says, and we, the black community, are not worthy of open space. How do we not see that we are the community that has the greatest needs for open space for our health and the health of our children?
That's absolutely right.
Man, this is an explosive issue.
You know, it really is. But Brother Jeff, as you have often talked about on several of your shows, the most explosive, the most difficult issues have one underlying thing in common: money.
Money.
There's a lot of money to be made.
The bag, the cheese.
On 155 acres of raw land that is undeveloped. Probably not counting what's out there off off of Pena Boulevard and in that area, but within the core city, probably the largest tract of undeveloped land left.
Who is Kenneth Ho?
He is one of the financial principals at Westside Development Partners, and as I've heard him describe himself, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, he can give you his title. He's the point person for Westside, apparently, on this project.
Where is he from?
I don't know where he's from.
Park Hill?
I think he lives in Stapleton. Don't quote me on that.
Central Park.
Central Park. That's right. Thank you, Brother Jeff. Thank you for getting me correct.
But I have a new name for the Central Park community.
What's that?
Because I don't know what it's central to.
Well,
but except the city jail or the county jail. So we call it County West, County East,
okay.
County North.
Well, I will simply say this. I respect and appreciate the fact that the residents in that neighborhood took it upon themselves to change the name based on the history.
They didn't take it upon themselves. Well, they took it on the helmet.
Well, yeah.
It's like, no, you changing this name.
It was pushed. I thought there were a bunch of creative names that I thought were reflective of the history and the culture of Denver and Colorado. But a decision's been made, and
do black lives drive property values down? Because no. I saw an HOA in Laurie that said that they can't have social justice signs in the yard like Black Lives Matter. And then I saw a realtor that was taking
I was going to
Black
say,
Lives
you
Matter
know,
signs
that
out.
realtor got fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
What does that say that, if a Black Lives Matter sign drives down property, I would argue the opposite. I would say that it would show that you're more welcoming and inclusive. And that, but if there are people who think that Black Lives Matter signs drive down property values in a system that does not value black lives, then wouldn't it not be a far stretch to say that they believe that black lives drive down property values?
No, I think that's exactly what they're saying, Brother Jeff. The reality is, with a legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, and systemic racism, we still have segments of the community and of the larger society. I mean, you listen to Donald Trump talk and you hear it, you see it visibly. They believe that having black people in the neighborhood is a negative thing.
Wow.
I think that what we're seeing by much of the activism and the social protest and the fact that a number of people are sort of waking up to the issues in this country, I think we're going to see a seismic shift and a cultural shift and change, which I think is long overdue and welcome. But I'm not going to fool myself into thinking it's happened already. It's a work in progress.
Tony Pickford says it could be such, and he's talking about the Park Hill golf course. It could be such an amazing space, and people in the community are helping a developer create another Lowry or Central Park. Ken Ho used those as examples of good development in Denver. If that happens, the gentrification in Park Hill will accelerate tenfold.
Well, that's right. If part of my concern is if you just allow for rampant development on the site, I think Wayne is misguided in thinking that it's going to directly benefit the black community. I've not seen that happen in Denver over the years, number one. Number two, I don't want it to end up looking like 9th and Colorado Boulevard. We don't need that repeated again. And then I think Sandry Robinette makes a real good point. Why shouldn't our community have vast swaths of open space, which is atypical in urban black communities around the country?
A neighborhood that I grew up in,
jungles.
right over around, several places, but right there off by the Owls Club, we had the East Denver YMCA. That was the only place.
The area formerly known as the East Denver YMCA.
Exactly. That was the only place for young people to have open space.
There was a big park, and I think at one point someone told me
and
that
it was a pool.
That outdoor pool at the East Denver Y was I think it was someone said once it was an Olympic-sized pool, or it was like the largest pool west of the Mississippi before you got to California or something.
There's no if that's an example of open space being dwarfed by development, I think that we don't want that model.
No,
I won't say we. I won't say French. I don't want that model.
I don't either. I mean, I remember, when my daughter was younger years ago, our church held a church picnic there at the East Denver Y site. And we could play softball, we could have swimming, we could do everything else there, and have a cookout. But those days are gone.
Sandy says we have a grocery store off of 40th and Colfax. It employs lots of young black people. Are you afraid to shop in an Asian store?
Oh, 40th and Colorado Boulevard. Yeah, the market there right off of 40th and Jackson, right across from Prodigy Coffee House.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
So this is a big conversation. I wonder why I haven't met Andy Ho.
Kenneth.
Why did I say Andy?
Andy Klein is the owner, I believe, of West Side.
Kenneth,
I think, is one of the principals.
I haven't met the principal. Why don't we have a black, or I won't say why don't we have, because maybe we do have, and I don't know, because I see there's a lot of development that is black owned coming down along Welton Street.
Mm-hmm.
There's some black principals that I see that are doing some very exciting things. I'm on board with a vision for Norman Harris to reacquire that property on 26th and Welton Street. That's a vision that he has that I think is very admirable. What is it going to take for blacks to have that kind of wealth management that you're familiar with, and we be our own Kenneth Hoes, we be our own West Side developers? Why aren't we there, or are we there and just not maximizing our potential?
I think, Brother Jeff, it's a combination of things. I think when we're there in some respects, when I look at the Harris family, the Cousins family, when I look at the work Carl Bourgeois has done in 5 Points historically, we've got a number of folks who have made significant financial investment to beautify, modernize, and improve the community. I applaud Norm Harris and a bunch of folks. Now, we disagree on the Park Hill Golf Course issue, but I applaud guys like Norman.
What do you all disagree about? Like, what is the disagreement? Like, for example, I want to get down to my basic argument. Private developers can do whatever they want to do with their private property within the bounds of whatever zoning, and all that stuff is just as racist as anything can be as well. Mm-hmm. But within the rules, private people can do what they want with their private dollars and their private properties. The thing that sticks this out is that you taking some of Brother Jeff's money as a citizen, and I have an easement into perpetuity. And so now we're partners. Like, when I say, why can't we do this? I hope Kenneth Ho knows that he's talking to one of his partners right now. I'm a principal also in this.
No, and that's our point, Brother Jeff. Clearly, a private landowner within the confines of zoning and land use can do what they want to do with their land.
But we're partners. We're partners.
We are, because the easement is owned. Now, again, the concept, I think, is difficult for some people, but the development rights that are owned by the city on behalf of the people are in perpetuity. They're permanent. And so you're asking the people of the city to give up a permanent interest they have for some development, and nobody knows what it's going to be or if it's going to be or how it's going to work or how it benefits the community. And I, like a number of us, think it ought to just remain as open space. And if a developer comes up creatively and engages the community extensively and properly, and I have not tried to dictate what that looks like, that we start building community consensus on what happens, then we'll talk about it and we can vote on it. But my whole point is, until then, no.
How long has West Side Development been functioning in Denver?
I don't know how long they've been in Denver. I want to say the last maybe 5 to 7 years, I think. I think they've got a couple of other projects.
What have they done for black people since they've been here? Like, is there a West Side Development Boys and Girls Club? Is there a West Side Development football team? Are they sponsoring Warrior Nation right across the street? The Pirates could use $25-50K to buy uniforms and helmets and participate. And the Police Athletic League has folded. The police are getting a major portion of our city budget, but have decided that they have no money for community. Has Westside Development sponsored the Pirates Athletic League or anything? Because I don't see their footprint in terms of community giving any further than I see the footprint of Deep Rock.
I don't know. I think you ought to ask Kenneth Ho that question when you get him on the show.
Kenneth Ho, the Pirates are right down the street. Cut the check and show. Don't tell me. See, Penn, I don't want to don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me what you've been doing, and if you ain't been doing nothing, do something. Yeah. And I get, have a footprint.
Yeah. No, and this is a difficult time, Brother Jeff. I mean, again, our proposal,
not if you got a property for $25 million that's worth 6 times that. It's Penn, let's be honest. It's a difficult time for some folks.
Sure.
But the folks that been getting the money all the time, it's a great time for them. They've been getting that stimulus money. They're getting it.
And
they getting that bag.
In fairness, I mean, during these times, if you have cash and you have disposable cash, now's a good time to buy a bunch of stuff because everything's on sale pretty much.
Okay. Well, Penn, I got to bring you back soon because we got to talk politics.
All right, let's do that.
I think that Hickenlooper has his hands full. Every time I turn on the TV, I see a Corey ad directly or indirectly pounding them.
Yeah.
Are we going to take the Senate with the approach that we're seeing with Hickenlooper right now?
Brother Jeff, I don't know. That's
is he sitting on the lead?
I think that John is sitting on the lead more as a function of people in Colorado in particular are not pleased with Donald Trump. I think that Cory Gardner has so closely aligned himself with Donald Trump that he can't create enough distance now. But the reason so many people wanted Andrew Romanoff to be the candidate is John's got these whole ethical issue questions that get raised. And even though I would be among those who would tell you they're not as significant as the commercials,
they'd send a black person to jail, though. See, that's the piece.
Yeah.
The economy is booming for some, and it's terrible for some. A rich white guy, a little ethical stuff, not the big deal. Yeah. Black person with a public defender, you want to take this plea? You want this football number or not?
And Brother Jeff, you raise a great point. And we see in a number of conversations, we see people saying that they have to have the quote unquote talk with their kids, particularly their black sons, about what you can and can't do in this society and in this world. And I know you and I both grew up hearing that you can't get away with the stuff that your friends who are white do and get away with. Society is not going to give you that latitude. You have to not be the same. You have to be better. You have to hold yourself to a higher and different standard because you aren't going to get those breaks.
Well, I think that Hickenlooper is playing not to lose and not playing to win. And when you play not to lose, sometimes in 62, 63 days in a wake up, it's going to be some slow singing and flower bringing.
Well, I hope John's campaign gets a little more aggressive on messaging and saying certain things.
It's 63 really days out. Like, when do you make that push? Is it not time to make that kick yet?
It's time to make the kick because ballots will be out in 3 weeks. So, because we're a mail-in state, thank goodness. And we ought to give a shout out to our Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold.
She's doing an excellent job.
Man, and she's pushing back nationally, trying to expand mail-in voting around the country, and that simply benefits and empowers our community because we tend to be the ones. I saw a report now in Georgia. They're now claiming that this governor, when he battled Stacey Abrams, they may have improperly removed something like 212,000 people off the voter rolls.
Enough for her to not win.
Enough for her to lose. Yeah, that's exactly right. So some coincidences just aren't coincidences.
Hey, listen,
they're the consequences of an intentional act.
Buying some land for $25 million that's worth 6 times that with an easement on it and a wink and a nod. That's like, don't worry about that. We got our man in our corner. Okay. That man in the corner can't stop that cut.
Well, there you go.
Can't stop. He'll give you 3. He'll give you 3 years. He can't stop that cut. Kenneth Ho, you better get over here. I'm not talking to the next person I'm going to talk to on the other side on this platform about this particular issue will be none other than Kenneth Ho.
There you go.
Kenneth Ho. Kenneth Ho will be the next person because I want to hear what his side is because he needs to talk to me because we're partners.
Yeah,
talk to your partner.
No, and you have talked to another stalwart and fighter for the community, and Lisa Calderon, Councilwoman Cedar Baca's chief of staff. And hopefully at some point you'll have the councilwoman herself here and she can tell you about, and she frankly, Brother Jeff, she has been wonderful through this entire thing.
She's brilliant,
working with SOS Denver. She's a warrior. She's a fighter.
And she's in her wheelhouse. She's a policy guru.
She's so smart. She works hard. She gets this stuff cold, and she's an advocate. She's an advocate.
Well, with that being said, I'm with Eric Clark, who says, a lot of people stand to make a lot of money on the development of this space. This isn't just an economic issue. This is an environmental issue. It's a public health issue. He'd like to see the community engaged in a real dialogue to best serve the community rather than politics getting in the way. Folks deserve an honest conversation about the future of their community. I couldn't say it any better than that, but what I'd like to do, Penn, is give you the final words about this open space, this golf course, and where do we go from here?
I don't know where we'll go next, but please understand that SOS Denver is not done. We think that Northeast Denver deserves to have an amenity like 155 acres of open space, which is something we own, we paid for, and bought 23 years ago, and it shouldn't just be given away to a developer who is promising some vague things but won't be specific. We need to continue to fight for and maintain a property right we've paid for fair and square. And SOS Denver will continue that fight to make sure that the community helps determine what happens on that site.
Sally J says, why aren't we addressing the fact that Westside does not have a person of color staffed? Oh, if you're not going to hire no color, what makes you think you go? No, please tell me that's not true.
Well,
please, Penn, tell me.
I don't, Brother Jeff.
At least Forest City went and got, the late, great Landry Taylor.
Well, ask Kenneth Ho. I do know in some of the forums I've been in, I think he indicated that that may be a true statement.
Kenneth Ho, don't do the pimping Ho game. Don't do that, man. You cannot convince us that you're going to go into partnership and ownership and be 10 toes in with the community, chest up, 10 out, and all of that, and you don't even have. We didn't say a black person on staff. People of color. Now they say BIPOC. You're like, man. I don't know. Maybe we should. I don't know. We'll come back. Penn, it's great. You go through the comments and maybe you can answer to them the questions, because there's been 100 more since the last time.
I know this has been a hotly debated issue, and people feel strongly about it, and I think that's great.
Hold on, we can't say that. Kenneth Ho is Chinese. Is he Chinese?
I think he's Asian American.
Well, then he is the person of color.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right, he gets 10 points for that.
Okay.
So he works he's a partner in the development group that has an Asian American on the team.
Yeah,
I like that.
I think he's a principal of the company. Yeah.
I support that. Now I got to ask the Chinese, what's his relationship with black folks? Like, Ken, you can't get we gave you something. I understand they own the Loretta Heights stuff too.
Yeah, they're redeveloping the former Loretta Heights campus, and council has approved that, and people can, again, go on the city website and look at the various agreements and deals that are happening there.
Oh, man. Come on, Kenneth. You can at least hire one of them moist Negroes, and I'm talking about the ones that'll tell you that stop and frisk is a good thing. You could get, at least get... Oh, Kenneth, come on, man. If you're the principal of a person of color organization and you don't have no black folks hired, I might not. I don't know. We got to talk. Kenneth Ho, let's have a conversation. But with that said, Penn, it's great to talk to you. We're going to have you back. You just told me that the ballots are going to hit in 3 weeks.
I think sometime in October, Brother Jeff. It'll be soon here.
You got to come back within the next.
We'll do.
Next hurry up.
We'll do.
All right, you all, go to brotherjeff.com, make a donation of any amount. Kenneth Ho, go to brotherjeff.com, make a donation of any amount, and hire somebody that you're comfortable with. But I would encourage you to get somebody in your corner, a good champion like Ali and Holmes and all. They had great sparring partners. They didn't just have people that they could beat up and then they get into the big fight and they get knocked out.
Yeah.
You got to have some black folks that's really about it and not just yes-em you and yes-em and you and yes-em and you because you got some bank. Because as you can see with Bloomberg, the bank don't win the day to day.
Not necessarily.
It's the people.
Not necessarily.
Get some people around you. All right. Don't forget about chubby curls. Educating the natural community one scalp at a time. You've got those little skinny curls. Make them chubby. Chubbycurls.com.
There we go.
All right.
All right, Brother.
Penfield Tate, appreciate your time always. And again, there's a big conversation about the Park Hill golf course. And if you want to see a sham, go see the City Park golf course. It's open. And if this is any indication of what happened there, we are in big trouble. But I think that there's some great people in the camp with Kenneth, and I hope he's listening to him. And at the same time, get over here. If you go down swinging, just might score a knockout. Rumble, young man, woman, and community. Penfield.
All right.
Right on.
Thank you, Brother Jeff. Thank you.
Rumble.